I like the idea there's a line out there too. We got a half hour before we even open.
That's exciting, yes. I'm glad to see it. I think people are ready.
Hi, I'm George the Antique Nomad. Come with me as I wander the country in search of valuable vintage, amazing antiques, and cool collectibles. We'll buy, sell, and trade at antique malls, shops, and shows, estate sales, flea markets, thrift stores, anywhere people go to find really interesting things that just aren't made anymore. So come on, let's go!
Hey everybody, it's George the Antique Nomad, and I am here at the Petoskey Antique Show in Michigan. This is the first morning, and I got here a little early so I could do some filming while there weren't people around, because once we get started, I expect we'll be busy and I won't be able to get out of my booth. His wife taken by slave traders, he ravaged the entire territory of Florida. I wish I had a show in Florida coming up. I would have to take that there to show off just for fun. Something I need to show you about this. See how it says 57/317. 57 tells us that 1957 was the date. Sometimes you'll see 57/61 or something like that, and that means it was re-released. But this one was copyright 1957 by Allied artists, filmed in the wilds of the Florida jungles with a whole lot of people that we've never heard of. Well, it's funny, the first thing I'm seeing at the antique show is a robot fish. That's pretty imaginative. Somebody went to a lot of trouble to make that. This show has a lot of interesting stuff. This dealer here has some very appealing and different kinds of wood carvings. I like these with the jungle animals. It's an African chair, all hand carved. I imagine this is 50 to 60 years old. A lot of these pieces were done in the tourist era, but they are really neat looking. A lot of good looking signs and advertising at this show. Southgate, California, that's near Los Angeles. That's where Treasure Craft had their first factory. It was an industrial area with a lot of meat packing and other types of businesses there, so that makes some sense. Horton's ice cream. Delicious Maryland broad-breasted turkeys. And brake service. We see a lot of this sort of thing in Michigan because it was a big state and an industrial state and a wealthy state at an early time. So there was a lot of business, and you'll see a lot of the items remaining from that time. Petoskey has several barns full of merchandise as well. And some of them are open this morning, some of them are not. I'm here really early. I got most of my unpacking done, so I want to take a look around with you while I can. This is the very first day of the show, so we're going to get to see some things before they disappear. This dealer has all sorts of things ranging from old dovetailed boxes and crates, which are very popular right now. You'll see prices in the 30 and 40 range and up depending on the product. You'll notice that anything having to do with ammunition tends to be higher. This is Remington. Yeast foam. And then you've got Western, that's also a shotgun drop and chilled shot crate. A little bit less if it's something to do with food. California grown and packed there is $25. They've got a lot of old industrial molds. Again, a lot of people are using these for artistic installations and repurposing. They have an entire trailer full of them. Again, we're in Michigan. A lot of old industry here that is no more, which is unfortunate for the people who used to work in those industries, but has certainly created a bounty of interesting things to repurpose for all sorts of stuff. And then street signs. We are seeing a lot of old street signs come into the market. Some of these are older than others. These reflectorized ones obviously are newer. Hey look, Bedford Drive. Makes me think of Misty at Thrifter Hunter Vintage Junker, because she's in Bedford, Indiana. But then you see a lot of these old black and whites too. There are towns throughout the Midwest that are switching over to reflectorized signs even today. And so we see these older ones available now. Indianapolis Avenue, that gives you some idea. And these sell, well, they've got prices around $40 each. We see that the interest usually has to do with a family name or a street you used to live on, or a word that means something else like garnet. Garnet would be something that a jeweler, for example, might pick up to use in a store display, and that's where the interest in these lies. This booth here, I want to show a sign, Overland Service. Overland was connected to Willys, which eventually became the company that made the Jeep. So that's a nice old sign. I believe Overland cars were not made after about 1930, and you'll see the name Danner and Andres. That would have been a dealer with a sign leading you to where to get it. It's priced at $8.75. Anything having to do with old car brands that are not around anymore, definitely valuable and scarce, because the people who have those old cars and have the money to keep them running have the money to have the sign in their garage. It is a wonderful sunny day today, so if you need a pair of glasses, well, these are quite gigantic. They're Goliath-sized. That's a really cool thing. I assume this was from an optometrist shop. I'm not sure how you would mount something so three-dimensional, but that is really something I've never witnessed in person. So I'm putting on my face mask to go in the buildings. This is the first show that I've had since the lockdown, and they are being very cautious. They want us to wear face masks inside. The dealers, obviously, that are prepping in the morning before there's a crowd or not, but they're going to have to put them on when the time comes, as we all are. Here's a neat pew with a carved Gothic design on the edge. People like these as porch benches and any variety of uses in a house these days. These have a great design to them because they're inside these lovely wood frames. You've got the woman in the field looking at the shepherd in the background. And then this one's very sweet as well. There's a Donald Duck rubber car from, I believe Sun Rubber did that. It says Donald Duck on the side. This is a 1930s promotion. There's a great cartoon with Donald Duck involving a car just like this from about that time, where his nephews Huey, Dewey, and Louie win him a car and he proceeds to destroy it because he thinks it's a scam. Good example of where you let your temper get in the way of good judgment. I think that was Donald Duck's purpose, was somebody to be a little less sweet and saccharine than Mickey Mouse. Some nice Navajo rings. I'm here early and I don't want to make anybody think that I'm getting into things I shouldn't, so I'm not going to touch any of this stuff right now, but hopefully we'll be able to come back and take a look at the prices on these. This basket appears to be Apache to me because of the pattern. And there's a neat one as well. The geometric designs are probably the most prized. The Southwestern are typically the most valuable of the tribal baskets. These both look like 1930s pieces. There is a neat spatterware covered jar. It's got a fountain motif on the side, if you can see that. This is spatterware. It's known as yellowware because of the buff color. It derives from the Bennington and Rockingham style potteries that were the first potteries made in the United States, but this one with the extra detail, probably a factory made piece from the late 1800s. Neat old seed bin here. A lot of neat old furniture at this show as well. This matching pair of tacked leather chairs is going to date to about 1890. And then we have a large blanket chest as well. Next door, something that does my heart good is seeing these old service outfits. These are somebody's that they wore every day, judging by the Buick logo, I would say in the 1950s. Al the Service Manager. What a great name for a service manager. You can just picture a time and place in the United States where somebody would have had this job and been very proud of it. Some really good looking toys here too. I especially wanted to point out the Buddy L for Borden's Fresh Milk. It's even got the crate with the bottles. That's a hard piece to find. These vans with the sliding doors and the slanted forward cab in the original boxes from the 1960s. And they're priced in the $125 to $195 range, which I have to say, for having the original box and being in pretty much mint condition, is a good price for those. I see people trying to sell those in less pristine condition without the boxes for those prices. So I think this dealer is very fair from what I can tell. These neat tin plain toys are priced in the $15 to $30 range. Here's a big old loader. That one is by Nylint, N-Y-L-I-N-T. And then this is by Structo. So they have a lot of the big players in the toy industry represented here. Here's another Minton box. This one is Gamble's The Friendly Store. So this would have been something you would have gotten from Gamble's. It's a 1963 era Ford pickup truck. There's its original box for Buddy L. Oh, and something I really like. Here we go. Studebaker Lark, 1959. This was the car that temporarily at least saved the company. They came out with one of the first compacts in the United States. I had a 1960 Lark that looked exactly like this. Beige, the whole deal. $50 for a promo car. That is really not a bad price. I'm having a little nostalgia fit. I might want to buy that. It was so pristine, people just loved it. And I loved it too. I drove it for a long time. Ceramic Christmas trees, of course, are very popular again. And then we have, for $300, the Sebring Wall-O-Matic. This would have been the jukebox controller that sat at your vinyl cafe table in the 1950s, and you could put your quarter in and get your 3 songs, and then you would press the buttons and it would tell the main jukebox to play something great like Lucille, although that's the Kenny Rogers version. Now, it's not just old items that you see, I mean, old being antique, in furniture at this show. These are H.P. Hansen out of Denmark, the chairs in the background. Absolutely mid-century modern with the original orange upholstery. Priced at $450 for the set. That's not bad for designer Danish furniture. Here's an attractive booth. More towards primitives and lodge-style decoration. These folks are out of Hillman, Michigan. They've got some nice fishing creels here. This one is LL Bean. LL Bean is thought of as being sort of a preppy sportswear outfit now, but of course at the time they were actually making sporting gear. This is priced at $85. I've been to their flagship store in Maine once, and it was really a fascinating place to look. Some great old quilts, and then you see the firkins. Those are those round jars, the wooden ones with the lids there in the back. And they're made with the tacked bent wood that goes around the top and is tacked in and comes to a point where the joinery is done. Then a lot of crockery, yellowware bowls. Next door to them, they have a display full of beautiful glass. I want to show these pieces here. These are called overshot. This is something in the late Victorian era where they would actually spray on little pebbles of glass to give that rough surface while it was still hot, so that when it cooled down, they were attached and fused into the glass. It's a collectible area all of its own. Most of the other pieces here are Fenton, including the lovely fern pattern picture on the left here. And then above we have a spangle or spatterware, but spangleware is what I usually hear this referred to as, and that's going to be a Victorian piece with the gold flecking inside. Next to that, some lovely peach blow. Peach blow is this custardy color. Fenton did it in the 70s as Burmese glass, but these are Victorian pieces. And the Victorian was done by companies like Mount Washington, some of our other early glass companies that are long gone, but they made beautiful ware. This is Wave Crest, a very large box, probably for collars. There's several pieces of Wave Crest and Nicara here. That was a company based in Connecticut, very popular from about the 1890s to about 1915. They produced under the Wave Crest, Nicara, and Kelva lines. And it all had to do, the Wave Crest typically is milk glass with painting, and then the colored pieces were under the other lines. And then for you uranium glass collectors, here's a bunch of pieces, many of which are true Vaseline from the Victorian era. Some of them will be later in time as well. You can see down on the bottom that starbursty looking pattern is Fostoria heirloom. Up on top, the birds there are all by the Stengel Company out of New Jersey. Stengel made really lovely hand-painted ware, and they were in business, I believe, until the 1970s, so it's something that people are more familiar with now because a lot of folks have seen those. There's a quite striking patterned fur coat in this space of vintage fashion. You see cashmere sweaters, a lot with the sequins, a hanger full of scarves. A lot of these look like they're 1960s patterns. You see this very cute psychedelic on the end here, which I think is actually a swimsuit. Wow. I think there's a picture of my sister wearing something like that about 1970. And you can even get a small hydroplane here. That's a beautiful, beautiful boat. But what really brought me over here was the Jansen Girl Diving. Usually this time of year I would be getting ready for a huge show in Portland, Oregon. It's been canceled this year. We hope it will be back in the fall. But Jansen was made in Portland, and I have a friend who's now in her 80s who was one of their first swimsuit models back in 1940. She's in the antique business too, a gal named Maureen. She's just great. Anything Jansen sells for good money these days if it's got the diving woman. And this is neat, this cutout sign for the Evinrude boat motors. This guy specializes in restoring boat motors. And here's this one, Johnson Seahorse in the original crate. These were made in Illinois, just outside of Chicago. Look at the way it's all shined and re-chromed. It's like brand new. People do collect these to use, but honestly, a lot of them just buy them to display on a stand. This one, the little Evinrude here, is priced at $1,000. He does an amazing job restoring them. And then there's also a really neat canoe here. This looks like it's birch bark and original. He really goes out of his way. I've seen this fellow in Florida at shows before, and he goes all over the country looking for these because you just don't see much of this stuff anymore. Once in a while there'll be a barn find or something like that. Look at the bentwood. It just took a ton of work for somebody to make this, and I suspect it was all made by hand. And one more, here's the Motor Go rowboat engine. Fully restored. They really are beautiful. Here's another wonderful booth with a lot of really great things. We'll start with the painted lampshade here on this arts and crafts lamp. This is priced at $385. These used to go for a lot more. The prices have really come down on arts and crafts and slag glass lamps, and so if you like that look, it is a great thing to pick up now because the prices are about half of what they used to be, so it's a good time to be a collector. Nice tabletop cylinder disc player here. This is before the round discs. They actually would use the old blue plastic cylinders, and they were grooved, and that's how you got your sound. They tended to get brittle and break easily, and records ended up being able to hold more recording, and so that's why it switched over. This woman here on the stand, on the moon and stars and globe. That's a motif we see in the late Victorian era. Look at this majolica corn. It's like a casserole because it's long and skinny, but I guess you could just put an ear of corn in it as well. Majolica was very popular with the Victorians because it was very shiny in its glaze and the colors tended to be bright. And people still mainly lived in houses that had gas lighting, so they wanted things that reflected light around the rooms and were really eye-catching. It reads differently in our modern era, but there are a lot of majolica collectors who still like these pieces, and this one is priced at $45, which seems quite reasonable. Again, no one's here yet, so I don't want to pick it up and help myself when there's no one around to see. I'm very surprised it's as inexpensive as that, though, which makes me wonder what the mark on the bottom is. This Scotty lamp from the 1940s is a cutie as well. And then they have some really beautiful turn-of-the-century prints. The one in the middle there, it's not an Alphonse Mucha, but it certainly has that look. I can't really quite get the signature from here. But she's got that wonderful poppy headdress and she's playing a harp. And then again, in the middle of all this old stuff, here's an amazing mid-century lamp. These are the types of things that I really look for when I'm shopping for my Florida and Seattle spaces. Such a great design. It's priced at $5.45. It's very Sputnik-y. It's got the simulated wood grain base. That one is pretty tremendous.
So while I'm thinking of it, please comment in the space below here and also hit the thumbs up button to like this video. If you haven't subscribed, click the subscribe button below. Also hit the bell below to be notified of new videos coming every Monday and Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern. And thank you so much for following along. Let's go back to this video.
Nice chest of drawers with old paint. People love lots of little drawers these days. And then this is a cute piece here. This is wainscoting made into a nice little cabinet. Next door, we see dealers like this sometimes who very smartly look for old prints. For example, this one, which is a nice old steel cut engraving from about 1840 with American scenery. This is hand colored later in time. But people like to frame these, and a lot of times people will sell them loose so that you can frame it to your own taste. They do have some framed items as well. There was a series done in the 1800s of Native American scenes showing the different tribes and how they dressed and how they lived. This one is Chippewa with the squaw and child, as they said. Squaw is considered a pejorative word now, but at the time people didn't think anything of it. But that is the mother and child. And this was printed by Charles Bird King. I.T. Brown was the lithographer and colorer. A lot of times these were done in black and white as steel engravings, and then they were, or copper plate, and then they were hand tinted and embellished, sometimes at the time, sometimes at a later time. And then this one from Paxton's magazine. Now, magazines were a really big deal when they first came out because that was your view of the world. The daily paper didn't print these large color items. In fact, a lot of daily papers didn't print anything other than typeface because the technology was very slow, so just to get the paper out was a feat. But a magazine, it would be purchased and then held onto for years and years and years because you could go back and refer to it whenever you wanted. And magazine subscriptions were very expensive relative to people's income back then. Very pretty flower. I always enjoyed these folk art tables made out of various remnants, mainly shells here, but I see some little mirrors. People would save up little bits, buttons and bobs, and then cement them onto a table base. So you get this really neat looking primitivist art piece. They're very collectible now when you find them. They're also very heavy. There's also a stack of good quilts over here. I see the blue and white in the drunkard's path. That's that one on the right there. All these different quilt patterns have names, and it's a whole area of study in and of itself. But drunkard's path, of course, this is in a time when drinking is becoming more controversial. There's starting to be the temperance movement, and the idea is, well, it sort of just weaves back and forth all over the place. It creates a great positive and negative space, and it's one of the more collectible patterns now. This painting is Carl Thorpe, and it's got a good signature. We can take a look. This is a New York City skyline. This is dated 1965, and it's three-dimensional in a sense. I'll see if I can get to where you can see. It's similar to palette knife work, but he's actually built up the canvas so that if you can see here, there actually is dimension off of the surface. Really neat impressionism. There's the signature there for you. The dealer has this priced at $18.50, and Thorpe is a recognized artist. So there's just more and more barns. This is actually a pretty big show. They say 170 dealers. I'd say closer to 200 from what I've seen. I think they got everyone in here they could. Lots of people are anxious to have a show. So I got a little more information from the dealer, and apparently Jean Thelma Geyer is known as a regional artist in the Dayton area, and all of these pieces are slate. So she would actually have to chip out the slate, look for large pieces that seem to have some sort of a structure that she could make into a face or plan out around so that she could do the big bird. I could imagine if you had a big slate fireplace that a collection of these mounted around it would be really neat. He's got some other cool stuff too. Some Massachusetts artists. I also like the mucklucks here. These are going to be Alaskan, I believe, or Arctic, possibly Canadian Arctic as well. Priced around $120 to $200, and that's kind of the going rate for vintage ones. Let's head into another building while we have a chance. This one's got a lot of sweet little silhouettes all over the wall. I really enjoy reverse painted silhouettes. Silhouettes, of course, start in France in the 1700s and are primarily portraiture and for the very wealthy. But in the 1920s and 30s, they became rather a rage in the United States and North America, and probably elsewhere in the world as well. Maybe some of our viewers from other continents can tell us if they're familiar with them. They're very collectible now. A lot of them were turned into advertising later in time. They have a lot of cute early 20th century pieces in here as far as little wall hangings. This is Cupid Asleep. That was very popular around 1898 when it came out. The kittens are by Curry. This was a California artist in the 1940s who did various photographic still lifes of Persian kittens. They're always white, and they're always very attentive looking. This fellow seems to have a lot of hunting and fishing related items here. There are decoys, including fish decoys. Yes, there are fish decoys as well, for ice fishing primarily. The one on the left here is an artist piece by Tim Lawrence out of Michigan. I've had a couple of his as well. And then you have duck decoys. These mostly seem to be painted studio pieces from the late 1900s. But you'll find early ones occasionally, and they're very expensive and rather hard to find. And then I see split bamboo fishing poles, a bunch of ammunition boxes and crates, and then more fish decoys here. There are certain artists that are becoming very desirable even in the later fishing decoys. They were not really inexpensive when they were made new, so they're not inexpensive now either. I see Tony Hughes, the brown fish to the right, which is a trout. There's a Carl Christensen behind that, which is a bluegill. He also did the big rainbow trout on the left there. They're very well done. These were made really to be put on desks and not made to be used for fishing. I've always been a fan of Manhattan glass, and the bowl in the center with the two handles, which is a harder one to find, is Manhattan. They only have it priced at $25. That used to go for $50 to $65. I know the market for depression glass isn't as strong as it was, but that bowl in the pink is hard to find. They didn't do much of the pink color. It was in the late 30s when they first came out with Manhattan, and it primarily was only made in clear, so that's a pretty good price for what it is. I collect some Manhattan, and when I bought mine back in the day, I think I paid $45 for mine and was thrilled to get it for that price. This old spindleback chair is interesting to me. It's got the painting that's evocative of Hitchcock style. It looks like it's 19th century. And what I really like is that it's got the little writing desk surface. You don't see that very often. And it was for someone who was right-handed, obviously. You can see the detail on the painting up on the top. And it looks to me that the painting, of course, was all hand done. And it looks to me like this was a handmade piece, because look at the bottom. Notice how the 4 carved pieces are not exactly alike. That means each of those was carved by hand. Another thing you can look for is, see here where the little gold areas in the center here, these are all hand carved too, because they're all a little different from each other. A machine would have made them all identically. So this is a handmade piece. This would be considered country furniture. Hitchcock style with that painting really comes around the United States about 1810 or 20 and continues to be made well into the late 1800s. So it's hard to date this exactly, but it's definitely a 19th century piece. Handmade furniture is something that I think right now is a little overlooked in the market. If you like true antiques, this is a great time to be collecting, because the prices on period and antique country furniture have definitely come down. But it's a great style and a great look. The new generation will come along and discover it eventually. There's always a reaction. Right now everyone wants modern and streamlined. At some point people will tire of that and they'll want traditional again. This space has a lot of neat white painted metal and patio furniture. Some designs I haven't really seen before. There's such a variety in metal furniture. And look at this little child-sized wicker sofa, or settee. That is very cute. This is a neat Victorian era piece with all of the scroll work and the beading, the little balls on the outside of the harp in the back. These look like they've been restored, but that's what people want because they can take it home and use it. The chaise lounge is a neat design. The ornate back on this. And then this deep piece here you can turn into a daybed pretty easily. And here's an unrestored Victorian example. Look at all the scroll work. Hard to find these in good shape anymore because wicker, of course, is perfectly good if you treat it decently, but if you leave it out for years and it starts to rot, or you let your kids jump up and down on it, it's not going to last very well. This original piece here even seems to have its original upholstery. Here's a tale of 2 posters. On the left, you've got, in this case, the Dominion of Canada Victory Loan. 3%, that was a lot of money actually back in the 1940s. In fact, come to think of it, it is now too. This was for buying victory bonds, so if you were a child during the Second World War, you would have seen those sorts of posters around. If you were a child of my age, you would see the poster on the right at the end of the Vietnam War. The war is not healthy for children and other living things. I remember that poster was all over California when I was a very little kid, because there was definitely a big reaction against the Vietnam War. Hopefully someday we'll figure out how to deal with each other in a way where we won't have to go to war all the time. That would be nice. And then above here, this poster, how steel is made. And this shows how half of every tank, gunship, and submarine is made from scrap steel. This had to do with the war drives where they melted down all sorts of stuff to make things for the war effort. And a lot of things that are scarce now are scarce because they were made before the war out of steel and then melted during the war to make munitions. This guy actually has a bunch of great graphics. Lots of interesting posters. He's got the Harding for President from 1920. There were all sorts of horrible scandals during his time. He died suddenly on a tour. I believe he had a heart attack in San Francisco. All-America football map showing you all sorts of great football teams, including my alma mater, the University of Washington Huskies. Go Huskies. Hopefully they'll get to go. We'll see how it goes this fall. Lots of political pins. Lots of promises, kept or otherwise. It's a political year, and so we expect that there will be a lot of interest in political memorabilia. And you can see they've got a wide range, everything from McGovern peaceniks to Democrats for Johnson and Humphrey, Ronald Reagan. Actually, hard to find Reagan stuff, believe it or not. Let's lower the voting age to 10. This is a pretty phenomenal piece of Judaica. Judaica is collectible in its own right, and this velvet wall hanging has lots of metal work, the metal fringe, very deep colors. This dealer has a lot of nice high-end things. I see a marble figure of the two boys here that looks like it would be Victorian era. In this case, the light came on just in time for us to show you these. The ginger jar is an especially lovely piece of cloisonne. I should get out of the way so he can do his work, but that is really beautiful in the multicolor. Canes are a collectible area, and this is fun. One is a gun stick, one is an umbrella stick. Sometimes you'll see them where they actually have a flask or decanter. That was to hide your hooch during Prohibition. Canes are very collectible for all sorts of reasons. The carved horse head is quite stately. A lot of these are tipped with pieces of marine ivory. This one here with the whale, the scrimshaw, is most likely a walrus tusk. There's a gold-tipped cane to the left. Canes have been very collectible for a while. I see prices between $150 and $300 off the top. Walking sticks, swagger sticks, they were all very popular to have, whether you needed one or not, in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. For our English viewers, I thought you might enjoy seeing what the Labour Party had to say. Labour's pension plan will bring relief and happiness to the old people, widows, and children. This would have been, I believe, 1930s or else right after the Second World War, and maybe one of you can correct me on that. But this was at a time when, especially if you had lost a spouse or if you were elderly, you were likely to be very, very poor, and there was a feeling of needing to do something to help people. So the pension plan was along the lines of what we have with Social Security in the United States, so that there'd be some provisions for those people in the end. These are Hudson Bay. You can see the stripes. Each of these is considered a point, and the more points the better on these. Hudson Bay blankets typically sell for around 100 to 150 depending on how many points and the age and condition. There is a beautiful quilt that looks like it's 1930s vintage in a large size in a pattern that you rarely see. Someone did this floral dogwood pattern, and that is just really beautiful. It's different than the more traditional patterns like the wedding ring that we see down here. These folks have some wonderful electric advertising clocks, and this is the type of clock that's very popular now. They've got the old Pepsi Cola, that's hard to find. Various dairies would do them. Iroquois beer with the chieftain, that's an unusual one to see. I'll try to get out of the glare so you can see the cheap, but it's a little hard to avoid because of the overhead light. That one's priced at $8.50, but they are really hard to find. And then this one behind for Standard Electric is a mechanical that also has a spinner and the lights going around. That is a really neat clock. You just don't see these at all anymore. Here's a great collection of mesh purses. I just love these. And the prices seem reasonable. $65 for the Whiting and Davis is not bad at all. They've got 2 of those. And then they have some of the Heritage collection. They're a little more expensive. They were done in the 1980s, which was close to the end of production for those, but the Heritage collection was done with the most lavish patterns they could think of at that time. Just beautiful. The patterning is really neat, and you can see how if you just had a wall full of them, that's like an art display right there. This fellow has some really neat artists on display here. This one is Frederick Smith. He's a plein air artist from California. There was a lot of interest in California plein air art after the 1915 World's Fair because a lot of these people showed, and that exposed them to a wide audience, so they were collected all over, which is why we're seeing them in Michigan. This is Joseph Herring. It's fun for me to see artists I'm not familiar with because I'm not from this area originally and haven't done shows here, so this is another Detroit artist, it says. And then I'll pull back here so you can see there's a really good one to the left that'll get me demonetized, so we're going to skip on that. And then down here, this is Alice Lippincott, and she was another plein air artist out of California. You can see it looks like eucalyptus trees there and an old falling down barn. Priced at $12.95. I mean, that's good looking painterly art for not a big price compared to a new commission. I wanted to show all these old German bisques and paper Santas and other holiday decorations. Neat case full of those. And then for your manger, we have sheep galore. A case full of little scent bottles. These are pretty collectible now as well. You've got everything from commercial bottles, which means that it was sold with the perfume in it, to collector bottles which were filled at home. I particularly like this one here, most expensive one in the case. I have good taste. That's a little scent bottle. A lot of times they would put things to revive women wearing corsets who would pass out from asphyxiation, so you'd have smelling salts and those. Sorry about the overhead light, but I have to show you these candy container and paper mache German Santas as well because they're really neat. I especially like the one in the middle dressed in green. We think of Santa wearing red, but he did not always wear red. And since we're in this time of year, let's show some patriotic stuff. Welcome home. That's a neat banner. We are proud of you. I believe that is going to date to after the Second World War. Then we've got the three-piece Uncle Sam outfit. This would be from sometime probably around 1920. What a cool thing. That would be fun to wear at the show today. But for $200 and as delicate as it is, I think it needs to just stay for display. The one on the right, the woman's with the umbrella, is $165. The umbrella is $195. We really see a flourishing of patriotic related themes around the 1920s because there's a whole lot of immigration at the beginning of the 20th century, and so people become concerned that we're starting to get all these folks who don't see themselves as being Americans, and we've got to integrate them. And so there was a real emphasis on patriotic celebrations in the 20s. Just a lot of really beautiful things at this show. And this is just inside. I haven't even shown you under the tents yet.
Thanks for joining me again in the fun and fascinating antique community here where online meets the real world. Please click the subscribe button below, click the bell to be notified when new videos upload, leave a comment below, and hit thumbs up to like this video. Links to our online social media daily posts and our items for sale are in the description. This is George at the Antique Nomad. Bye for now.